Welcome to the Psychology of Black Womanhood podcast, the space where research meets the real world. It's here that we center the voices and experiences of Black women. I'm Dion Stevens, and today I'm sitting down with my co-author, Dr. Danielle Dickens of Spelman College, and we're discussing our book and the heart of this podcast, The Psychology of Black Womanhood. In today's conversation, we're not only sharing the journey that we took to create this book, but also how it plays a vital role in providing insights into the often overlooked experiences, perspectives, and needs of Black women across mainstream psychology. Further, the factors that directly influenced our journey, including the influence of Spelman College, importance of community support, and the centrality of our personal social circles encouragement, are explored in today's discussion. Okay, so here we are finally talking about the Psychology of Black Womanhood book. And that title says a lot. So maybe we can discuss how we came up with this title, The Psychology of Black Womanhood.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. You know, when we had these discussions about what we were going to name the book, I know we threw out there Psychology of Black Women, right? And a lot of the current textbooks are named Psychology of Women, Psychology of Gender and Women, Psychology of Gender. And I don't know about for you, I'm curious what you were thinking too, but for me, I was thinking about, okay, if this is going to be the first textbook on the psychological understanding of Black women, and it's going to be different from all these other Psychology of Women textbooks that really centered on the experiences of white women. What, besides the content, let's make sure that our textbook title is also different from the other related textbooks. So in thinking about, Psychology of Black Womanhood, I was like, the womanhood piece to me adds on this, it's hard to explain. It just adds a little bit more uniqueness to it, more cultural aspect to it than just saying Psychology of Black women.
For me, womanhood framed it that a lot of this is socially constructed. It makes it less essentialist. Even the word Black for me, because, my background is Caribbean, and then there's also Latin American. I'm from Canada. This, by saying Blackness, a lot of that was what does Blackness mean versus African American or Afro-Caribbean. I think Black was used because, one, it was an encompassing term, especially since we're thinking about it in terms of intersectionality. And then womanhood was more encompassing in terms of framing it that a lot of what we're talking about are the result of socially constructed influences of what it means to be Black and what it means to be a woman. And so for me, that's where I came from. Even the book itself, I think, is really important to think about. There's that Toni Morrison quote where it says, if there's a book you really want to read, but it hasn't been written, then you must write it. So maybe we could talk about how that sort of represents the journey coming up with this book. I don't think it was necessarily a unique idea, but it was put into place. And I got to give you credit for that.
No, thank you. It probably came when I started teaching Psychology of Women at Spelman. And I probably have gone through over 5 textbooks in teaching Psychology of Women. And each semester, I was trying to find a textbook that centered Black women a little bit more than the previous textbook that I used in the previous semester or previous year. And so each year I was like, I'm going to write my own book. Each year I would say it. And I can't think of the specific year, but I remember I shared it with my student. And I said, what are your thoughts on if I wrote a Psychology of Black Women textbook? And they were just like, yes, you got to do it. And so that was probably the first encouraging piece, because I just sat with that idea for a while. And like many others, right? That was probably some of it too. Of course, this idea, I knew that I didn't want to write it alone. I knew that this is a project that had to be with other Black women. And so I thought of who's someone that I admired in the field, admired their research, their work, and that they are also teaching Psychology of Women. And I thought about you, immediately thought about you.
Right.
And so that's how we both got started with starting to write the proposal. But what were your thoughts? I'm curious of when I presented this idea of bringing you in to write this book, what were some of your like initial thoughts?
Was excited. It was exciting because I'm like, we need this. There isn't any textbook out there about Black women, even across other fields. There are lots of books about Black women. There is, of course, Women of Color, which was one of the books I love to use by Beverly Green and Lillian Comas. They are the foundation for building where we are. And there's lots of books about Black women in specific areas. So there's Black women in mental health, there's Black women and research and theories. But there wasn't one that sort of summarizes everything together. And I think that's what I was so excited about this, is that we can now pull together all the research, and having a textbook particularly, it gives us foundational information, also elevating and highlighting the voices of Black women. So when you approached me, I was like, yes, I'm on board and I'm excited. What's interesting is I think a lot of people wanted to do it or knew that there was a need, but to actually sit down and do it, you were like, okay, I'm going to do it.
Just thinking about our process for, writing the proposal in the book, it was a lot, not just physically having to write it, but emotionally. There were times we cried of like, this is a lot, just because of we were doing this during the height of COVID. We had personal things that we experienced throughout the past 3 years. For me, it was like the pressure and making sure that we got it right. And it also felt like it was like writing another dissertation, but more intense. It was just a whole nother level. So I think that it was, and that's what I would hope people get out of it. As we're talking about this, is that it just took so much to write it, and that we put so much into it. We were intentional about the content, the images, carefully thinking about the headings. And so we were really intentional throughout the whole process of writing this textbook. I didn't know this in the beginning stages of writing the textbook, but publishers do provide editing, but it's more just line by line, mechanical, grammatical type of editing. We knew it was important to find a content editor, right? Another Black woman that would be able to read through all the chapters and provide us with feedback and edits on the flow of the chapters and the content. Like, does this make sense? Is this clear? Because we want to make sure that the textbook would be accessible to not only people in academia, but people outside of academia, right? People within the community. And so, yeah, I think the content editor was great in giving us that type of feedback of like, this is too academic language, or, provide a, more clear example here, or you all mentioned this, but you didn't talk about this topic, right? And this is a common experience among Black women. So I think she did a wonderful job, and we acknowledged her in the book.
I think that's something unique. When, as Black women, we had to bring in extra lens, and even the photos, we had to pay extra for the pictures of Mamie Phillips, who is, one of the foundational Black psychologists. We paid extra for pictures of Kimberly Crenshaw, intersectionality, Henrietta Lacks. Also for Megan Thee Stallion, we paid extra for those. We knew these pictures were important, and so we made sure we put extra time into doing this. So we had to pull in a lot of extra, and even how we wrote. We pulled in research, but we also used Essence magazine. We talked about Black Twitter. We had to talk about spaces that were outside the academic spaces, because Black women's stories and our realities are not easily accessible in these types of spaces. It's important to acknowledge that Spelman was in this, because I think the spirit of Spelman was central.
Yes, I owe Spelman, called sometimes Dear Spelman, for this book, because Spelman is a historically Black college for women. It was founded on April 11th, 1881, in the basement of a church, Friendship Baptist Church. And it started off with the purpose of educating women and girls and allowing them to get a formal education. And then eventually it was created into a college. And it's only one of two historically Black colleges for women in the US. Another one is Bennett College. And so with Spelman's mission, like centering on educating the holistic self of women of African descent. I have a lot of roots and ties to Spelman. My mom graduated from Spelman, and so she really encouraged me to go to Spelman. So being a Spelman alumna, graduating from Spelman, that was my first experience of being in a space around so many Black women, beautiful, educated Black women. I learned so much about what it means to be a Black woman, even in society where we oftentimes are stereotyped and discriminated against. And so being in a space that was just uplifting and so supportive, I didn't know that I needed that. Then when I went to graduate school in Colorado and being one of few Black women, or the only in some cases, I appreciated Spelman even more. I don't think I appreciated Spelman when I was a student at the time. Being in Colorado, I appreciated it even more. And then that's when my desire to just learn more about the research, the psychological experience of Black women, and when I started to use interdisciplinary approach of Black feminist thought and intersectionality, that really encouraged me to like, oh, I would love to come back and teach at Spelman. And so when I got the opportunity to come back and, going through that whole process of applying for jobs and coming back as a faculty member, it just meant so much. And I appreciated it even more. And so Spelman was just instrumental, especially my students. I didn't realize for so much in graduate school that I felt like I couldn't be my authentic self. And so coming back, it was like my students wanted to learn more and understand me more as a Black woman. And so being in that space and the students having a desire and eagerness to learn more about themselves as Black women and other Black women, that's really what motivated me as well to do the book. And that's why I would say that Spelman was really helpful in providing financial resources, received an internal faculty development grant that paid for the photographer and allowed us to purchase some of the images. But you are at a Hispanic serving institution. And so I want to know if you can talk a little bit about, why is this textbook important to you and the work that you're doing?
It is, as a Black woman, great to have this representation and what's it telling our stories, but also what is our story being told to people who are not Black women. This was actually one of the reasons I really liked that we were doing a textbook. With a textbook, it does a broader coverage than just a book or even a reader or like an edited volume. It does introductory knowledge while doing critical skills. So it's a jumping off point. So we do an introduction to things that people might not have heard. We're pulling together the research from diverse Black women and diverse sources of research that you can put into one book versus if it's just us and an author. But also, usually in particular in psychology, we have the classics, but most of the classics are usually determined by, who has the most publications, accolades, or the highest impact factor. We were able to then pick the classics for Black women's research.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said about the importance of a textbook. And that's why, for me, similarly, it's like I wanted to write a textbook and not just a book or edited volume. Because another thing, too, is that we think about this, attack that's happening on DEI and the banning of books and the changing of curriculum, right? And who has control over that. And so I think that the development of a textbook has the potential to change the development of curriculum around Black women in psychology and related fields. So the development of courses, right? That maybe people are like, oh, I would love to develop this course, but I don't have the right book. This textbook in some ways can begin to make that stamp on there should be a subfield on psychology of Black women, right? There are enough bodies of research, theoretical frameworks, valid measurements on Black women. There should be this subfield, the study of psychology of Black women within mainstream psychology. So transitioning and talking about, something that we wanted to do is that we wanted to, make this textbook jargon free, accessible to the community, affordable as well. And so I think that was great that our, publisher was on board with that. But another thing too that I think was another great addition that you added to the textbook is making it accessible through podcasts, social media, and the importance of presenting it in community spaces. So I want to see if you can talk a little bit more about that.
Well, I think it even comes through how we got knowledge. A lot of knowledge is not in academic spaces. And so this book can actually be used for community reading groups. The chapters can be assigned to book clubs because the majority of people, particularly in Black communities, are not in university. So we don't want it to keep the information in one space. We do all this research about our communities. We need to give the information back. And so something like a podcast is how we are telling the story. So I think that's important. And on the social media, on our Facebook and Instagram, we're pulling the news stories that are out there that we're talking about and going, this is what we talk about in this chapter. So it's making the information accessible, but also giving people the language to really be able to articulate in spaces that are supposedly spaces of power norms that, look, this isn't just my feeling. We know this is in the research. We've used your tools to give evidence to our experiences. So it's not just about keeping the book in this academic space or giving this privileged knowledge in one space. It's a back and forth relationship.
I think that's really important and central. And there's an idea of why us? And I think about why not us? I think our backgrounds really meshed well and really added to the uniqueness and the diversity of this textbook centering on the psychology of Black women.
And this is our legacy. I mean, this is one of the things I'm proud about. And I didn't think about it till one of my colleagues said, this is really big. This is a legacy. In one of the largest fields in academia, this is the first textbook centering on Black women and centering our lives. And I'm really proud of it. So I got to thank you again for being the push. There were times where we're not going to make this deadline. You're like, we're going to make this deadline, because a lot of people want to do it. And especially for Black women, it's hard to get books out. The research shows that. So that in itself was a big push. And I think that's important to celebrate and acknowledge.
Yeah, no, thank you for being on this journey with me. And like you said, it's our legacy. And I'm excited for everyone to read it, especially our students to read it and get feedback from them. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited. And I'm proud of the work that we put together over the past 3 years into this textbook.
That was Dr. Danielle Dickens, an associate professor of psychology at Spelman College and my co-author of the book, The Psychology of Black Womanhood. To find out more about our work related to this book and broader research expertise, including accessing our articles, websites, and social media handles, go to this episode on our website's podcast page. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Psychology of Black Womanhood podcast. We have a lot of great episodes coming up for future shows, so make sure you check out the topics by going to our website, www.psychologyofblackwomanhood.com. One more thing before I go, as I say every single episode, please show us some love by leaving a review on whatever platform you use to access this recording, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon. And make sure you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or some people like to call it X if you haven't already.